Greetings, travelers. I'm your host, the C. That knows a lot, Dr. Waluigi. So, I have a confession to make. I had originally planned on only looking at the TV series and movie of He-Man, and thought those would have taken me into the end of the summer. But, obviously that wasn't the case. So, after a couple of glimpses into the other parts of the He-Man series, I've decided to take a look at a form of media I haven't looked at yet. Comic books. Believe it or not, there are a lot of He-Man comics, and just choosing two was hard. But I think for my first comic book review, I'll be looking at the first comic book released by DC. So without further ado, here's my review of DC Comics Presents number 47, From Eternia, with Death. The comic was published on July 10th, 1982, and was written by Paul Kupperberg and Mike W. Barr, and was edited by Julius Schwartz. The comic was the introduction of He-Man in not just comics, but also his introduction into the DC universe. Before this, He-Man's only contribution to comics were the mini-comics you got from buying the toys. Since then, this comic has become a collector's item and has gone up in price from its original 60 cents to anywhere to $100 or higher. It's definitely the comic that most people look to collect, as it was written when the toy line was popular, but came out a year before the show aired. Though I will say that it's not as impressive to own once you read it. On the distant planet of Eternia, Skeletor and Beastman are trying to get into Castle Grayskull by having Skeletor use half of the Power Sword in order to open the drawbridge. However, this ends up opening a portal to Earth, where Superman gets sucked into the portal and becomes Skeletor's slave. Can He-Man free him from Skeletor's clutches, or will He-Man fall to the might of the Man of Steel? Since this is my first review of a comic book, I'm only going to be focusing on the writing and the art. As far as the writing goes, it does fit with the comics of the time, though I do think that the way the writers wrote the dialogue for the He-Man characters is weird. They speak in a type of Old English way that you would see in something like an early version of the King Arthur stories. But I did have to remind myself that because this was written before the show aired, the writers had to go off of what they saw in the mini-comics, which is evident when you have to think about why Skeletor has half the Power Sword, He-Man is using a battle axe and shield, and why Prince Adam has to go and see the sorceress in order to transform. The only big thing about this comic that I personally didn't feel was utilized all that well was the inclusion of Superman. I don't think that he's a hindrance to the comic, but he does feel pointless until the end of the comic where he and He-Man take on Skeletor, which only lasts for a few pages before Superman leaves back to Earth. Though I do like the fact that the writers include the fact that He-Man recognized Superman because of his mother being from Earth. The artwork in this comic is also very good considering the time it came out. The artwork was done by Gene D'Angelo, Tom Zucco, Ross Andrew, Kurt Swan, Jose Delbo, Ben Oda, and Janice Chang, who all did an amazing job recreating Eternia and even added a few more touches to the world, like having the world similar to an old fantasy novel, including towns with a local tavern or near a large mountain range. The art design for Superman is just fine, but that's to be expected from the DC Bronze Age. If I had to nitpick about one thing in terms of design, I don't like that they used the Teela toy design for the sorceress. Again, I understand that they were only able to use the designs from the toys, but it does feel weird seeing the toy version of Teela talking to Adam like she knows about him being He-Man. As someone who's not that well versed in the making of comic books and has only really gotten into comics recently, I can only judge this on the few things that I've read. And personally, I don't think that this comic is that good. It's definitely a cool piece of He-Man history and is worth checking out, but it didn't grab me in the way that I was expecting it to. I'm not sure if that's because I'm surrounded by better stories from comic books or because I expect more from the writers. I give DC Comics Presents number 47 a 5 out of 10. If you're a diehard He-Man fan and want to check out his adventures in comics, this isn't the best place to start. Plus, with how expensive this comic goes for, it'd be better to look for a much more recent comic, or possibly buying the Omnibus edition, which has much better stories in the collection. Well, thanks for watching. I'm Dr. Waluigi. And remember, don't judge a book by its cover, cause you'll never know what's inside. Good night, everyone.